Our numbers are still building, but I think we will commence the session. We've got a lot of material to get through, and I'm sure you'll find it all very informative. Just noting that we will be recording this session, mainly for the purpose of just making sure that we have an accurate record. But if you have any objection to being recorded, I would ask that you drop out of the meeting now. Okay, if we go on, Lynette, to the next slide. And at the start of this session, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, seas and waters across Australia. We honour the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, elders past and present, and embrace future generations. I myself am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And just to make a note in regard to that recording, we will be publishing the material and the recording on the AEMO website for future reference. A quick disclaimer, we're presenting this information, it's our interpretation of indicative impacts. Those interpretations expressed are not binding, and we would encourage you all to do your own due diligence in terms of compliance with the rules and requirements for implementing these reforms. Okay, just some general housekeeping. We will ask that people remain muted during the duration of this forum. The one exception to that will be at the specific Q&A section at the end, when we may ask you to come off mute and ask a particular question. In terms of questions and queries, you will see on the top of your Teams slide there a Q&A button. We'll be using this function during the session. We would ask that if you have a query or a question, please type it into the Q&A. We have a number of SMEs on the call who will look to respond to your questions or comments during the session, and we'll look to incorporate some of those at the end in the general Q&A, where we'll be addressing some key themes. And lastly, in attending this meeting, we have some expectations of one another. Please look to contribute constructively, be respectful, both on the call and in the Q&A. And we would ask that you familiarise yourselves with AEMO's competition law and meeting protocol. It's outlined in the Appendix A of the slide pack that was distributed. So just bear that in mind when making questions or making comments. Okay, if we move on, here's our agenda. At the moment, we're in the welcome. Then we'll have David present context and program overview, just to provide I guess a general alignment of where we are. Then a number of our program initiatives, and we'll have our engagement people and subject matter experts provide an overview of the particular initiative. Following that, a walkthrough of the changes that have been incorporated in version 5 of the NEM reform implementation roadmap, pointing out that this one does look to incorporate a number of the activities that have come out of the national CER roadmap as well, and Michelle will lead us through that. Lance will then talk us through some work that's been done on a participant impact assessment tool, which may help a number of you in understanding the impacts and the timing of particular initiatives on your business. We do have a section set aside for Q&A, and finally how to get further involved in the process. So that's the agenda. As you can see, it is reasonably packed, so we will look to run pretty well to time there. Okay, if we move on, just to outline some of the objectives. This is a general briefing. We're looking to provide an overview of AEMO's NEM reform program, the initiatives that are in progress, their impact to industry. It is a focus on the implementation of those initiatives. We do not intend to cover the merit of the rule or the policy development that goes around it. So this is really a focus on the implementation of those initiatives. We'll walk through the incremental and material changes in the implementation roadmap. And we hope with a combination of both those, with the information that we're providing, it will equip you, the stakeholders, with information to understand a little more how these reforms may impact you and provide some guidance to how you can become more involved, because we do recognise that the implementation of all of these initiatives is a collaborative effort across the industry, and we want each and every one of these initiatives to be successful for all of us. Okay, with that, unless there are, we'll move on and we'll ask David to provide us a context and program overview. David, over to you.
Great, thanks, Greg, and good afternoon all, and welcome to today's session. So I'll just run through this section quickly with a high-level overview of the NEM reform program, the context and background. We'll have a glancing look at the initiatives that we'll talk through today and the broader scope of the program, and a bit of a high-level overview as well on some of the key achievements that we've had to date. Thanks, Leonard. So really, I guess this will be no surprise to anyone. The shift to renewables is well underway. We have renewables accounting for, increasing volumes of total electricity generated and delivered through the NEM at this point in time. As we transition from that traditional generation, the thermal generation, into these kind of future technologies and the future renewable type generation, which have increasing kind of capabilities. They bring new technologies, and we've got new types of storage coming online. We need to modernize the power system. In simple terms, we need to uplift the digital systems. We need to uplift the market system processes, the market system itself, such that they can support the new generation types, the new technologies, and the new capabilities that those technologies bring. So the NEM reform program has been established by AEMO to collaborate importantly with industry through the delivery and deployment of the key reforms that we've all worked through the policy landscape over the past few years. We get to the business end of the deployment with the NEM reform program. So this really represents implementation. So it's been really, I guess, in terms of what we see this program delivering, into the future is more renewables once deployed, reaching energy or reaching consumers. We should see an uplift in our security power system of the power system, increased safety, increase in our capabilities around the processes and systems that we use, so increased efficiencies for energy participants and AEMO itself in terms of how it operates, and importantly, more investment in the renewable energy infrastructure and the infrastructure more broadly as we shift the dial and move towards that kind of future power system. Next slide, please, Leonard. So in terms of the scope, the program scope is quite comprehensive, and I appreciate and I'll apologize for how busy this slide is, but I think it's important to kind of have a look across the landscape of what the NEM reform program represents. So on screen, on the left-hand side, we've got AEMO's foundational and strategic initiatives. We can think of these, I guess, if we zoom out again, apologies, we can think of these as being in three broad categories. We have AEMO foundational and strategic initiatives. We have a number of pathways, resource adequacy, essential system services, integration of CER, and transmission access, all denoted by their kind of color coding there. Those being the ESB pathways, which some of you on the call will be familiar with. They've been complemented by a data strategy as part of that ESB roadmap work. And additionally, we've got some reforms happening in the retail space and in the wholesale electricity market space, which are on the right-hand side of your screen as you look in the yellow and dark blue. So I guess, these this category and the scale of reforms just represent the volume of change underway. The green ticks that we have on the slides represent some of the initiatives that we've delivered to date. So the AEMO foundational and strategic initiatives kind of represent uplifts in AEMO's legacy systems, and they also, I guess, represent strategic investment where AEMO believe there's some uplift required in the future, and we see an opportunity at this point in the life cycle for the investment to be brought forward for the purposes of efficiencies and so forth. In terms of the other initiatives outside of AEMO's foundational and strategic and the ESB pathways, so the retail market and the wholesale, they represent initiatives that are kind of part of the rule change BAU process. As rule changes continue to be deployed and completed and reach those draft determination and final determination stages, they start to make their way into the NEM reform program's deployment schedule. They also represent some of the, I guess, the government policy changes as well, like for example the consumer data right, the policy developments that we see and we pick up and deploy as appropriate into this particular program of work. So I guess at a glance, this is the broader scope. There's 40 initiatives at the moment, and we will speak to some of those that are in flight through this session today. Next slide, please, Leonard. So in terms of just an overview of where we're at to date, at a glance, we've completed 13 initiatives. We've currently got 8 initiatives in flight. Those are initiatives that are in-flight initiatives, typically have a final determination or some equivalent mandate to progress. We have 5 anticipated initiatives. Anticipated initiatives are initiatives in the policy landscape that have gone past a draft determination stage. And so we've started to do some early work on high-level impact assessments, for example, is some of the work that we would begin to undertake once we have a kind of sufficient view of the incoming policy. We've had 16 initiative releases to date, with number 17 planned for the 24th of, or sorry, for December 24, not for the 24th of December. That's the FPP non-financial operation release, which is targeting December, early December. Thanks, Leonard. So 26 total projects to date that we've worked on at various stages, delivered in flight and anticipated. Next slide, please. And I guess this speaks to, and a bit of a thanks to, all on the call. We have had, this program stands up on the back of a lot of engagement that we have. So a lot of input from industry. There's been a lot of time from industry in delivering, a number of these reforms and contributing to these reforms going forward. We've had 300 plus engagement sessions. I think it's probably increased quite a bit since we put this in. 300 sessions since the inception of this program, so that's September 2022. We've had 4,000 or so people come through those sessions. So, the aggregated number there being the number of people who've been involved in some way, shape, or form. And we've a strong subscription to the newsletter. Stakeholders' feedback indicate that that's been quite useful. So if you have colleagues, or if you haven't subscribed to that today, it's certainly something to think about. Thanks, Leonard. I'm happy to stop there, Greg, and hand back to you.
Thanks, David. And with that, I think we'll move on to an overview of the program initiatives, in particular, starting with the in-flight one. And David, don't go away, because I think you're up for introducing a summary overview of our in-flight initiatives.
Yes, thanks, Greg. And look, I won't spend time on this. This is really just for note. I guess use this slide as a reference for the initiatives that we have in flight. So those initiatives that have final determinations or an approved business case, a mandate to progress. We have just summarized those here for those on the call. We have the dates that we expect these initiatives to go live, and we have a list of the impacted stakeholders from AEMO's perspective. So I guess if you are in one of the categories that we've identified in the impacted stakeholder bucket, please do pay attention to what these initiatives mean for you, and I won't stand in the way of talking through the detail on these initiatives, Greg. So I'll, with that, hand back.
Thanks. With that, Dave, I think let's look through our first of those initiatives. And Gareth, if you'd provide us a summary snapshot of progress regarding SCADA Lite. So Gareth, over to you.
Awesome, thanks Greg, and good afternoon all. So for SCADA Lite, as the NEM evolves, we will have more and more non-traditional resources across the network. So talking things like demand response service providers, virtual power plants, small resource aggregators, and even remote grid assets. And SCADA itself is crucial to the operation of the scheduling framework of the NEM, and as such, having SCADA is a requirement on some participant categories. Unfortunately, setting yourself up for SCADA is not cheap, especially for a new entrant. So the idea with SCADA Lite is it provides a simplified SCADA capability that will give NEMO the two-way telemetry, I guess you'd call it, to mimic the that provided by SCADA. So this initiative is about providing that lower cost access to SCADA to lower those barriers to entry and to support the integration of those non-traditional resources that I mentioned earlier on. So the capability itself, we're due for release early next year, and just note there that the actual date for when we or EMO will release that capability is subject to change. We're still dealing with a few things at the moment, but that change we don't anticipate that being significant. But I guess just reminding again that those key benefits of SCADA Lite is that it lowers barriers to entry for emerging participants. It gives us EMO greater visibility and control, and improves that operational efficiency and hopefully grid security. And I guess particularly it enables other initiatives, for example, the IPRR initiative that should be starting fairly soon. Next slide, please, Leonard. So in terms of impact, you'll see there on that slide, largely on EMO. And that's in part because participation in the SCADA Lite is generally optional for participants. It should be noted that a participant who wants to use SCADA Lite may need to invest in some software and some hardware to do that. And it's not a free service, so EMO, we would be charging a fee on a cost recovery basis for participating in SCADA Lite. Next steps, how you can communicate with us or get updates from us, we're doing that or providing that via the PCF forum. And at the next PCF, we're intending to provide an update on when the actual go live is for SCADA Lite. So I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's 11th of December. Oh, there it is on the slide. We haven't yet started taking applications to use this service. We want to first get everything squared away first and implementation to our production system before we do that. And at that point, participants can reach out to us and look at getting applications in for using the capability. I think that's all I want to say this morning, Greg. Do you want to take questions now or wait till the end?
I think we'll wait and see if you get any questions through the Q&A function. I don't see anything there yet, Gareth, so thank you. And
thank you.
With that, we will pass across to Oliver, who will take us through an overview of frequency performance payments. Oliver, over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. All right, so to start with the overview, it's the same story that Dave and Gareth have referred to, that as the generation mix transforms and the system changes, we have in particular more renewables and batteries coming online, it is an increasingly complex task and increasingly important to keep the frequency of the system at the target level, and for facilities to provide a frequency response that will allow us to keep the grid stable and the lights on. To that end, AEMO is implementing a rule change from the AEMC that was made in September 2022 called the Primary Frequency Response, PFR, Incentives Rule Change. So the frequency performance payments that AEMO has adopted as the name of this reform are our primary frequency response incentives. The FPP change addresses the issue of primary frequency response and the need for that by incentivizing helpful response from generators, as well as scheduled loads and grid scale batteries in their day-to-day operations. The impact of such facilities on the power system frequency will be calculated at an extremely granular level. It will be measured and a calculation done with every 4-second SCADA measurement. And those measurements will be combined into a 5-minute calculation, which will provide incentive and penalty payments, both sides of the equation, which will be allocated based on the impact of an individual facility. Positive and negative payments are equal in each interval, so it's a zero-sum process. Given that we are going to all the trouble of calculating these extremely granular performance indicators called contribution factors, we are going to use those same factors as the basis for allocating the cost of regulation FCAS, regulation, frequency control, and ancillary services. That is currently done under something called the Causa Pays framework, which calculates a single factor for a 28-day period. So we'll be moving from a factor every 28 days to a factor every 5 minutes. What are the benefits? Why are we doing this? Well, the cost and value of helpful and unhelpful frequency performance will be transparently individually priced, which will allow facility operators and hopefully will incentivize facility operators to make informed decisions about their own operations in the operational time period, and also investments they might want to make to improve their FPP outcomes. As I said a moment ago, recovery of Reg FCAS will now be done in a significantly more granular way, which again will allow participants to clearly see and respond to the link between performance and financial outcomes. This reform, of course, relates to our essential system services pathway, in particular system security services. The key dates, well, the first one here is just around the corner, so it is a very exciting and important time in this reform. But between the 9th of December and May 2025, we will be in non-financial operation of the FPP system, meaning we will be taking actual bids and actual performance data and calculating factors based on those and distributing them as soon as the calculation is completed. All we won't be doing is moving the money around. That comes in on the 8th of June 2025 with full go live. Next slide, thank you. All right, so thinking about impacts, starting with our market and industry stakeholders, we've got a moderate impact indicated here against generators, both scheduled and semi-scheduled, integrated resource providers, and market customers. That is because almost all of those will be getting these individual contribution factors. So while there is no actual requirement for them to change systems to consume data or what have you, no matter what happens, you will see this on your settlement statement. In terms of AEMO, well, yeah, certainly the creation and then ongoing operation of this new thing is highly impacting a couple of our key teams, including systems capability, operational support, and market operations. Going along with that is the digital impact and the need for this highly complex and sophisticated new functionality to be maintained, incrementally improved, etc. All right, so our participant change impact, we've got no impact for the first year here and then one at the end. I'll quickly go through them. There's no impact on the registration process, although just to note that we do take the list of registrations each day as part of the FPP calculation process. Similarly, there is no impact on NEM bidding or dispatch processes. However, FPP outcomes should influence operator behaviour if the incentive is working. There's also no new metering obligations. 4-second SCADA data is required for participants to receive an individual FPP contribution factor. However, so if you can't provide that SCADA data, you will become part of what's called the residual and get your allocation in a different way. There are settlement impacts, of course, because the new contribution factors, as I've said, will be used to allocate the amounts to be deducted or credited in the settlement process. And that is for both the frequency performance payments and Reg FCAS. The next steps, the production release and the start of the NFO period is virtually upon us, as I said, the 9th of next month. Participants are very much encouraged to use this NFO period to familiarise themselves with FPP operation and outcomes prior to the commencement of financial flows 6 months later. The publication of market trial strategy and readiness criteria for financial operation will be provided on the 31st of January next year, and participants are encouraged to review and query that once published. And finally, we encourage you to consider the settlement process for recovery of regulation FCAS and how that is changing. That is the end of my material. Are there any questions? I haven't seen anything in the chat.
Oliver, I think you have one in the Q&A function that will let you deal with offline. I think there's one from Tim there for you to look through. But let's move on now to the next presentation. Jen, if you would provide us an overview of enhancing reserve information.
Thank you, and thanks Ollie and Greg. So I'm going to run through enhancing reserve information and also ST parser procedure and recall today. So why enhance reserve information? Well, essentially it's becoming quite difficult to forecast net demand when looking at current operational timeframes. And there's several factors contributing to this, and that really includes renewable energy resources, which are variable, like wind and solar, the weather, participant availability, commitment decisions, storage levels, and distributed energy resources such as solar, batteries, EVs, etc. So what this sort of means as well at the same time is that the nature of reserves themselves are evolving, with a greater reliance on power plants that only run when the demand is high. So we'll be providing additional information to participants, which will help them, including availability of scheduled generators, aggregated by NEM region, and the state of charge of grid-scale batteries, also aggregated by region. It's important to note that ST parser, procedure and recall period, which I'll go through in a minute, and ERI, the readiness approach and the timings will be linked up together. So when I run through the timings in a minute, you'll notice the testing and the go lives are actually aligned. The key benefits really for participants are allowing you to make more informed decisions, especially ahead of periods of anticipated low reserves or high wholesale prices. And this should allow more supply to be available at times of high demand. And this can potentially reduce the overall price for consumers at the end of the day. When thinking about key dates, it's the 1st of July 2025 as the go live for previous days' charge data for batteries and scheduled plant capacity reductions. And AEMO will voluntarily also publish state of charge of grid-scale batteries each trading interval, unless you are in the Apple Isle of Tasmania, in which case you have to wait until the 1st of July 2027. And that's when we will publish the state of charge of grid-scale batteries regardless of market development. On to the next slide. Thank you, Lenage. So looking at impacts in terms of industry stakeholders, it is schedule generators and integrated resource providers, and they are low impact. And then EMO teams are operations and digital, moderate sort of impact to our digital teams. And thinking about participant change impacts, really it's only to registration. So there's a new data point, maximum storage capacity that's to be added to the registration process, and the annual Schedule 3.1 validation. There's no other impacts to participants. Thinking about next steps, really it's about asking participants to assess changes to your NEM reporting and think about how you can take advantage of this new information that you're going to be receiving. We're looking at doing testing with industry between May and June of next year, and that obviously aligns with that 1st of July go live date that I mentioned, unless you are in Tasmania. If you would like to find out more, then you can go to the ERI webpage on the EMO website. You can check out the initiative brief that we have, or you can drop us an email to the NEM Reform team. On to ST Parser, please. Okay, thank you. On to the next slide, Lenage. So ST Parser, just let's clarify what that stands for firstly. So short-term projected assessment of system adequacy. It's a bit of a mouthful, I have to admit. This is related to ST Parser procedure and the recall period in particular. So this is essentially and effectively an update of the rule as AEMO raised some issues with the existing framework in the NER as it was limiting flexibility and the ability to make changes that may be beneficial to the market. And there were also some inconsistencies with what AEMO does in practice and some definitions that were no longer fit for purpose. So the flexibility that's now introduced will allow participants to communicate their unit availability and, importantly, their outage conditions. And it'll also help us to assess reliability and security in the NEM as the market develops. So there's some new rule changes in there using a principle-based approach. When thinking about key dates there, we actually have a current draft ST Parser procedure and consultation paper, which is online. So you've got until Monday if you would like to provide any feedback on that paper, and that can be found online. Otherwise, looking at February next year, that's when the final ST Parser procedure will be published, and the rule commencement will be as of the 31st of July next year. Next slide, please. Looking at impact assessment to stakeholders, there is a low impact across the board. And that is to generators, both scheduled and semi-scheduled, integrated resource providers, market network service providers, and then those same teams within AEMO operations and digital. Thinking about the change impacts for participants, the bidding interface will change, the NEM reports will change. There will be new DUID, there'll be a new DUID availability report, and obviously a new definition of parser availability, and obviously a new ST Parser procedure. And all participants will now need to provide the recall period in the new ST Parser timeframe. So what are the next steps? The industry testing will line up with that of ERI that I mentioned previously. So that's that May to June period next year, so that we can look at that go live in July of next year. So impacted participants should look at planning and thinking about implementing those changes to their bidding and reporting interfaces. Again, if you want to find out more, you can go to the ST Parser Procedure and Recall webpage, which is on the AEMO website, or you can contact us via the email. And I think that is it for me. Thank you, Lenage.
Thanks, Jen, for the overview of those two initiatives. Alice, if you're online, if you could provide us an overview of the Improving Security Frameworks initiative.
Just checking if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. Took a minute to come off mute there. Thank you. So the Improving Security Frameworks Rule Change Project has been stood up to manage power system security and reliability throughout the energy transition. So as synchronous generation comes offline, historical sources of essential system services that were previously supplied as a byproduct of energy are decreasing in the NEM. So ISF seeks to improve the way we manage services like system strength and inertia throughout the transition to ensure the power system remains secure and reliable. So the procurement and enablement of system security contracts by AEMO and TNSPs will be critical to maintaining power system security and reliability, and will also reduce AEMO's reliance on directions, which are currently used to manage this. The key frameworks that are impacted by ISF sit under the non-market ancillary services bucket, so changes mostly to the Network Support and Control Ancillary Services or NSCAS framework, as well as the introduction of a new transitional services framework. In terms of key benefits, so we'll be incentivising investment in system security, reductions to market interventions like directions by AEMO, as we'll be able to schedule these services into the market to address gaps, improve transparency around these services to enable investment decision making, as well as the assurance that power system security and reliability is going to be met throughout the transition, and increasing our understanding as well of how best to manage these challenges in a changing power system. There are a few key dates relating to ISF. So from the 1st of December this year, 2024, the new inertia framework commences, as well as the revised TNSP cost recovery framework for non-network system security costs. And the first transition plan for system security will also be published next week. And the transitional services guideline, which was due for December 2024, has been published early and is available on the website now. On the 31st of August 2025, AEMO will publish the full security enablement procedures, and this is the final version of the provisional procedure that was published earlier in June this year. And on 2nd of December 2025, the full enablement obligations on AEMO commence under the rule. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of impacts externally on our market and industry stakeholders, we've got a moderate impact against generators and integrated resource providers, and TNSPs are expected to be moderately impacted by the project as well. Internally, AEMO's ops and digital areas are highly impacted, and our system design area is moderately impacted. So what does this actually mean in terms of impacts to market and industry stakeholders? So providers of these services will be required to update their systems to support provision of operational information, so things like the availability of any ISF units, and to receive enablement instructions to schedule those units as well. There might also be some system impacts to TNSP systems to provide contract information to AEMO, and there may be some impact on settlement for those system security contracts. And in terms of processes, so TNSPs will be required to align their business processes with what goes out in that security enablement procedure I mentioned, which will be out in, the full version will be out in August next year. In terms of next steps, so from Q4 2024, so currently out until Q2 2025, there is a working group that's been stood up with TNSPs to support formal security enablement procedure consultation, which is to commence in Q2 2025. AEMO is publishing the second version of our high-level implementation assessment and also a readiness approach in early December this year. We really would encourage participants as well to review those documents once they're published and send us any feedback that you may have. And as mentioned in December this year as well, the new inertia framework commences and that TNSP cost recovery revision. AEMO is also going to be publishing that first transition plan report for system security by the end of December. And there's some links there on the page if you'd like some further information. So our ISF AEMO webpage and a few other key links there. Thank you.
Alice, thank you for that overview. ISF is certainly a major undertaking for industry and for AEMO. At this stage, our next set of initiatives really are a couple that sit under the Market Interface Technology Enhancement, MITE, and I asked Dom if you would provide us an overview of progress and scope in that area. Dom, over to you.
Great, thanks Greg, thanks Alice. If we move to the next slide, please. So the Market Interface and Technology Enhancement suite of projects or set of projects refer to IDA, which is Identity and Access Management, IDEX, which is Industry Data Exchange, and PC, which is Portal Consolidation. We previously referred to them as the foundational and strategic initiatives, but we're now referring to this group of three as the Market Interface Technology Enhancements, pronounced MITE projects. Now, these projects came about through a slightly different mechanism than our usual sort of reform initiatives through rule changes. These were identified as being foundational capabilities that support the reform initiatives that we have. So through 2023 and half of 2024, we conducted a series of workshops with industry to scope out and identify what the benefits and costs of these initiatives would be, and essentially what they would look like and a time frame for delivery. We sought industry endorsement, which we had received at the exec forum in March of this year, and then took it through for approval within AEMO. That approval was granted, and we're now progressing into planning. Now, there's a slight nuance on IDEX, which is that we have a decision point 2 associated with a second phase of IDEX transition, which is the migration of legacy services. And that part of the initiative has not been endorsed or approved. We're going to be seeking that endorsement and approval at the end of next year. These initiatives are essentially around how AEMO interacts with participants, both machine to machine, which is the majority of IDEX, data exchange patterns, the way we interact from a web presence, so that's portal consolidation, and the identity services that support both of those. The general theme is that we want to move to unified, streamlined set of standards that are secure and reduce barriers to entry for new participants. So if we move to the next slide, please, Leonard. Now, we didn't do these on our own. This was very much a collaborative exercise with industry. We developed the business case together, as I mentioned earlier, and right now we're in the middle of a technical planning phase for IDEX and IDAM. Now, that is a significant piece of work. I think we have workshops scheduled almost weekly now, and we've engaged with a focus group of participants, so selected individuals from participant organisations, and a working groups where we present the results of those focus group discussions. Now, this is really important for us because we see this as being a foundational capability that in eventuality will apply across all fuels and markets. So getting that buy-in and that engagement early is really important so that we can make sure that it's applicable for all of those fuels and markets. So if we move to the next slide, please. The benefits of these initiatives, you can sort of see it on the slide here, but to summarize, it's about streamlining our operations, improving reliability and responsiveness, enabling the NEM, our set of reform initiatives to be done quicker and with less cost, because we provide a foundational layer of capability that all of the NEM reforms can leverage. And importantly, improving our security posture. There's, in addition to those capabilities, a number of pain points or improvements that we're introducing with these capabilities, including more self-service for participants and the ability for participants to share data in a more secure way between participant organisations. So leveraging what we call an organisational hierarchy. If we move to the next slide, please. From a stakeholder impact perspective, the IDEX Foundation is expected to be fairly small impact on participants because we're building foundational capability. We will be engaging or asking participants to opt in to a pilot so that we can test the capability that we're building. However, that would, as I said, be an opt-in, so participants don't need to engage in that if they don't want to. It's also important to recognize that when we're talking about IDEX, we're not going to be changing the data schemas or the end use of any of the data fields that we're talking about. We're simply referring to how the data gets exchanged between participants. So therefore, the primary technology impact lies in participant gateways rather than back-end systems, because the back-end data and use of that data is not changing, simply the exchange of data. From an IDAM perspective, there's a bunch of opportunities that participants will have based on the new capabilities that we'll be delivering. So some of the data sharing permissions capabilities, the ability to self-serve and use essentially federation will allow participants to simplify the way the identity is managed on their sides. I think that's all for me. If you just go to the next slide, I think that's my last slide. Back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Dom, and thanks for that overview of these three very important initiatives there. As Dave said at the outset, part of really some foundational capability. We'll move on to our final in-flight initiative, which is flexible trading arrangements. And Justin, if you could provide the group with an overview.
Hey Greg, thanks, and good afternoon everyone. My name's Justin Stewart. I'm a business lead with AEMO. I'm helping with the consultation for flexible trading arrangements. So maybe just a quick context to this role, and Dave Reynolds spoke to this earlier. There's been customers are now adopting more CER, consumer energy resources into the NEM, rooftop solar, batteries and electric vehicles. So this rule aims to provide more options for consumers to manage and separate their CER from their passive loads. And when we talk about passive loads, we're talking about their general light and power. So how it does this? It does this by creating a separate NEMI for the CER device and also a separate meter for that device as well. And these separate devices are what are called secondary settlement points. The process of energy allocation is done by using the existing approach in embedded networks of subtractive calculations. Importantly, though, this rule is optional, and the framework has three key areas, which is on the slide. So for large customers, they can have a different FRUM for their secondary settlement point. So you could have two retailers. A small customer can participate in the framework, however, it has to be the same FRUM. And finally, the rule has introduced the ability to meter what has traditionally been unmetered loads. So things such as public lighting and street furniture, so they can be metered with new technology. The rule creates these new metering types across, there's three aspects to it. There's a type 8A, a type 8B, and a type 9, where a type 8A refers to large customers on secondary settlement points. The type 8B is secondary settlement points for the small customers, and a type 9 metering installation is for what we described before as street furniture. So when we're looking at the key benefits, it allows consumers to gain the full benefit of their CER device and also to monetize those into the market. Importantly as well, it also removes a barrier for large participants that are currently using the embedded network framework to provide similar services. So at the moment, some participants are using the embedded network framework where they've got a small resource aggregator downstream of the primary connection point. So this rule removes the requirement of participants to go to the AER to request a waiver to create an embedded network for that situation. Also, the new metering types lower the installation costs as well. So one of the barriers at the moment is that, I suppose, if we looked at street furniture, for example, Those new metering requirements remove that barrier of space, which currently happens. So potentially these new metering types can be inbuilt into the technology. So the rule allows that metering types could be inbuilt, for example, into a battery charger. So looking at key dates for us, our consultation needs to be completed by the 30th September next year. So working backwards, we need to have our issues paper published in early April next year. Also, the rule staggers the effective dates as well. So Type 9 or street furniture, that goes live on the 31st of May 2026, whereas and the remainder of the rule starts on the 1st of November 2026. Next slide, please. So key impacts here, it really is across retail and metering. Importantly as well, there's a new role created as part of this rule change. It's called the NEM service provider role. So they create and maintain NEMs for secondary settlement points, and this role is very similar to the embedded network manager. We've also been in discussion with industry via our pre-consultation workshops, where we've talked about specific impacts of the rule to DNSPs, retailers, and also metering parties. So for networks, we've outlined options for them to receive NEM standing data and metering data from secondary settlement points. For retailers, we've looked at the options for NEM discovery and also the energy allocation for secondary settlement points. And for metering parties, we've spoken about the accreditation process and also the specific metering requirements of the rules. We'll aim to have an all-industry session in February next year to tie that discussion together. Thanks, Greg.
Justin, thank you for that overview. So that brings us to the end of what we had termed our in-flight initiatives. I'm going to invite Dom back to talk about anticipated initiatives, and really the main difference between the two is the level, whether things have reached a final determination or not. As you'll see from some of the timeframes here, there are imminent implementations of some of these initiatives. So Dom, please walk us through our group of anticipated initiatives.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. I'll just run through each of them one by one, starting with metering services review, which from an AMC perspective is known as accelerating the smart meter deployment. We're expecting a final determination very soon, tomorrow, in fact. So AEMO will update or publish an HLIA to reflect the final rule, and we're anticipating publishing that on the 18th of December this year. We've also scheduled some pre-consultation workshops for power quality data, and looking to schedule those. This initiative really has two main commencement dates. One relates to changes to MSATs to enable the smart meter deployment to occur, so enabling dates and issues to do with sites to be published in MSATs. And the second delivery point relates to power quality data, which is the facilitation of sending power quality data between metering coordinators and DNSPs, and that has a different delivery date than the first component. The second two, shortening the settlement cycles and integrating price responsive resources into the NEM IPRR, both have final determinations expected in December. AEMO proposes to publish HLIAs in February 2025. Now, we usually aim for a six-week period between the determination coming in and us publishing an HLIA. Is due to the Christmas break, this is going to need to be slightly later than that 6 weeks. Hence, we're targeting a February timeframe for the HLIAs here. Shortening the settlement cycle is the aim of this initiative, is to reduce the working capital needs of retailers. There were 3 pathways put forward in AEMO's draft HLIA, with a recommendation for what we call pathway 3. So we will find out where the AMC have landed on that once the final rule is received. And the indicative commencement time is mid-2026 for that initiative. For IPRR, the aim of this initiative is to establish a mechanism to incentivise what we're calling price responsive resources to participate in NEM scheduling processes. This would be a voluntary mechanism, and the go live date is from the draft determination was November 2026. So we will find out the commencement date when the final rule is received. On the next slide, some more initiatives that we can talk to. So Project Energy Connect market integration relates to some of the settlement changes that we'll need to make in order to support the energisation of the new transmission line through New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria, creating a loop. The draft determination is expected in December, and we will again look to publish an HLAA post that, targeting a February timeframe. Portal consolidation is not a NEM reform initiative. Sorry, it's not a reform-driven initiative. It is within the NEM reform program, but it's part of the mighty suite of initiatives. Due to this being a smaller initiative than IDAM and IDEX, we did not ramp up this initiative at the same time as we started IDAM and IDEX. However, we think that the time will be soon to begin this work. We're anticipating beginning in March next year. The business case was endorsed and approved. It's simply that we didn't start it straight away because it was a smaller initiative and we needed to get IDAM and IDEX going first. So we hope to be able to come back to industry with some dates and some initial plans in March 2025. Similarly, EV data is a non-reform initiative. It was originally a reform initiative. However, we've retracted that rule change and are progressing a non-regulatory approach. The aim of this initiative is to improve the visibility of electric vehicles and electric vehicle data as it relates to the electricity industry. So information around where charging stations are located, and their capacities and those sorts of things that can be beneficial for market participants and AEMO to understand. We're in the process of developing a recommendations paper, which we're aiming to publish in February 2025. Following that recommendations paper, we'll obviously be seeking consultation or feedback. And following that, we may, if the recommendations paper stands up, if there's benefit in pursuing this, then we'd be looking to commence in March 2025. If no questions, back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Dom. And that was a great overview of a number of initiatives that will soon be part of the overall program. So that basically takes us through our overview of our in-flight and anticipated initiatives. Really, the next session of this briefing is to provide you an update on the NEM reform implementation roadmap. So we're currently have published version 5 of the roadmap. Michelle's going to lead us through some discussion on the changes between version 4 and version 5, and also to address some aspects of the alignment to the national CER roadmap. So Michelle, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And I'll take you through the main updates which we've done to version 5 of the roadmap from version 4, which was published in April. So for those who are not familiar with the roadmap, so the roadmap was established a few years ago to assist AEMO and stakeholders navigate through the breadth of reforms that are coming up in the next few years. And The roadmap was centered initially around the ESP's post 2025 market design and the reforms and rule changes that came out of that process. However, as David spoke to earlier in the presentation today, the scope of NEM reform and also the roadmap has broadened since then to capture retail market improvements and also wholesale reform. And the roadmap also captures gas reform initiatives as well. So yes, we are up to version 5 of the roadmap, which we published on the 31st of October. And we've done that in collaboration with the Reform Delivery Committee. The main objective here of the roadmap is mainly to provide transparency to market participants, for market participants to be able to track an initiative from their policy development all the way to implementation, to coordinate their regulatory and IT efforts, to and also the fact that it's an integrated program helps to drive down costs to industry and also gives AMO and market participants a true understanding and appreciation of the implementation and delivery challenges faced. Next slide, please. So I will take you through the changes and the process we followed to update the version 5 of the roadmap. So as mentioned, we update the roadmap in conjunction with the Reform Delivery Committee, and we make 2 main publications of the roadmap each year. So there's a main publication in April and another one in October. And when making these publications, we do this in accordance with the change management process, which has been established by the NEM reform program. And if you want to know more about the details of this process, it's available in the governance document, which supports our roadmap publication. So at the August RDC meeting, we took forward a draft change management and impact assessment along with a draft change register, which we presented to the RDC for RDC endorsement prior to publication of the roadmap. So this change register and we took that to the RDC prior to publication of the roadmap. Next slide, please. Here we've just put 2 screenshots of what the roadmap looks like. So the green section is the electricity reforms and the orange section is the gas reforms. So the roadmap is in Excel form. It tracks various initiatives over time from policy development to the go live stage, and each color denotes various stages reform goes through in its life cycle. General updates we make to the roadmap include various incremental and material changes. We've included rule changes that we were aware of as at around October. We've excluded rule changes that have gone live to make the roadmap as current as possible. We update the roadmap for any changes in naming, rebranding of initiatives. We capture those in the roadmap as well. In addition to these general updates, we've also we've looked at the DER initiatives in our roadmap and done a mapping exercise to align it with the national CER roadmap, which was published by the Commonwealth in July. So I will talk to that exercise in the slides to come. Out of around 41 electricity initiatives this time, 18 of the changes we made were material changes, and there were no material changes across the gas reforms to be noted. Next slide, please. So what is a material change? So for the roadmap, we consider a material timing change, a change in the timeline, plus or minus 2 months. across these examples here, the timing changes have been more or less an extension. So where the project timeline has shifted at minimum 2 months outwards. So we've grouped the material changes into scope changes and timing changes, or if these initiatives had both a scope and a timing change, they are included in the first column over there. Scope changes, all scope changes have been captured in the roadmap update, whether it's a complete change in scope or an incremental change, or if we've got more information on the initiative through the HLIA process or through a draft decision of final, we've updated the roadmap to incorporate those scope changes. A majority of these changes that has been listed on this slide was spoken to in earlier by other SMEs or in the anticipated and in-flight section. So I won't be talking to them individually, but for just so you all know, what we've done is since the April publication, we've looked at all the draft decisions, final decisions, HLIAs, or consultation papers relating to all the initiatives in the roadmap and captured them up until October. So I won't be going through those details right now. Unless there's any specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll answer them. I will call out, however, the shortening the settlement cycle initiative. So when we updated the roadmap, the go live date for that was the 30th of June 26. However, subsequent to that, the go live date has changed to August 26, as pointed out in earlier slides as well. So this was done to incorporate a transition period for that project and also to enable implementation over a less volatile period. So this goes to show that the roadmap is only a snapshot in time and there can be movement after we do publish the roadmap. I will also call out the timing changes which we've made in the middle section of this slide for IDAM and IDX and portal consolidation. So version 4 of the roadmap, the timelines for these three initiatives were based on the draft business case. However, version 5 of the roadmap, we've really pared back those timelines and to incorporate the actual work that's happening through the MIT working group, the initial consultation that's happening between now and early next year for IDAM, IDX, and then portal consolidation to follow in after the first quarter of next year. For some of these DER initiatives like dynamic operating envelopes, distribution, local network services, we've pushed out these timelines as the future scope is dependent a lot of the work of the CER, National CER roadmap, which I will be talking to soon. So next slide, please. So if you want to know more about the roadmap, so there is the Excel version of the roadmap. And also along with that, we have the initiative briefs document, which gives a 1 to 2 page summary on the initiatives, which highlights the issue, the solution, and also gives a high level participant impact assessment, and also gives an idea of the procedures, guidelines, market application, market interface changes that are coming up for these initiatives. So the initiative briefs document is a good summary view of the initiatives for whoever is interested. There's also the program scope and governance documents for extra information. Next slide, please. So I spoke of the National CER roadmap. I'll give you a bit of background on that. So in November last year, energy ministers agreed to develop a national CER roadmap, which brings together CER reforms at not only a jurisdiction level, but also brings it to one location, so that CER is now tracked at a national level. The National CER Roadmap tracks the various reforms based on the four work streams: consumer, technology, markets, and power system operations. And under these work streams, there's various priorities like C1, C2, C3, and so on. And another layer to that is under each priority, there is either rule changes and projects that will either be delivered through the CER working group, the CER task force, and or market bodies. And AEMO is definitely part of that delivery as well. So when the National CER roadmap was published, AEMO made a commitment to the Reform Delivery Committee to do a review of the DER reforms that is in our NEM reform roadmap against the CER roadmap. And that's what's on this slide now, which we did a mapping exercise to try and understand where the DER reforms sit within the CER priorities. So the column on the left is the ESP's post-2025 reforms, which are within our which is within the NEM reform roadmap. So those are the DER initiatives on the left. Then the column in the middle aims to identify a reform priority in the CER roadmap, which captures the reforms in our NEM reform roadmap. So for instance, unlocking CER benefits through flexible trading was mentioned in CER priority M1. IPRR was mentioned in CER reform priority M1 as well, and so on. So the middle column is where we've tried to reference the CER reform priority it was captured in. And where it wasn't clear, like for the instance, DER operational tool, there was no clear mention of that initiative. There's a question mark there, and we will be monitoring to see whether that scope is still relevant, or whether it should stay in the roadmap, or whether it should drop off. So how we've presented the DER reforms in our roadmap is in the column on the right. As at now, we've retained all our DER reforms as they are, with no changes. However, we will be monitoring the CER roadmap as it progresses through the working group and the task force, and tracking the delivery, and we will be aligning our DER initiatives in our NEM reform roadmap to align with the national CER roadmap. So I think this mapping exercise will evolve, and we will keep updating this as time progresses and update our roadmap accordingly. And the main point is to align with the national CER roadmap as much as possible. So next slide, please. This slide is talking to the emerging trends and opportunities that's coming on the back of the roadmap. So the trends are nothing new. What we've seen what we've spoken about in our previous roadmap updates has been very similar. We've spoken about the congestion in delivery over 2025 and 2026. This continues, and the uncertainty around that is real, and it's also the uncertainty will increase with the work around the policies that are currently being developed, which may likely be delivered during the 2025 and 2026 years. So for instance, the CER roadmap, those policies are currently being formulated, and the delivery may fall in the 2025-2026 period, which is already quite congested. So along with the current risks and uncertainties, there are opportunities as well. So AMO, the RDC, and our wider participants have been working quite collaboratively to identify bundling and sequencing opportunities for various initiatives. And we've also been working very closely through the high-level implementation assessment process to understand the true impacts of this congestion and bring it to the public domain and work on solutions together with industry. So here are 3 examples which we've identified as bundling and sequencing opportunities. So for instance, SCADA Lite and IPRR, there's a sequencing opportunity there as SCADA Lite is a prerequisite to IPRR. Then enhancing reserve information and ST-PASA procedure recall time, a bundling opportunity there through the consolidation of testing windows, tech specs, and the data model releases. Metering services review and IDX, again, a bundling opportunity, consolidated working group or focus groups for the delivery of the power quality data release. When dealing with this congestion issue, AMO has also developed a participant impact assessment tool to help navigate through the congestion issue at hand and also work with participants to help participants and AMO understand this a bit better. So I will pass over to Lance now to talk through the participant impact assessment tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, for that overview. And I think as we can see, as we go through, we're up to version 5 of the implementation roadmap, and it does reflect both the changing scope, timing, and I think complexity of the overall transition, which brings us nicely, as Michelle was just referring, to Lance providing an overview of some work we've been doing around helping to, I guess, demystify or help people understand impact of particular initiatives across market segments. So Lance, across to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Greg. And good afternoon, everyone. So good to see so many people on the call. As Michelle's pointed out, and as people on the call are likely to be aware, there's been an ongoing discussion across the program, particularly over the last year, just around delivery and regulatory congestion impacts. Given the pipeline of initiatives that we've kind of seen in the roadmap, whether those are in flight or being delivered to date or anticipated as Dom took us through in the coming months and years. This issue has certainly been raised at with the Reform Delivery Committee at our Program Consultative Forum and was most recently discussed at the Executive Forum in August, where we provided members with a bit of a snapshot of what is to come over that 2025/26 period. Now, wanting to dig deeper on this issue, we asked ourselves internally, can we better support industry's understanding of the impacts and our own understanding of the impacts, given the information that we have on hand? So whether that comes from the roadmap, from the individual HLIAs that have been spoken about, or just wider feedback that we hear generally from participants through those various forums and working groups. Essentially, can we take this information to build out a database, a tool, if you like, that allows for an improved assessment of those impacts over time, and something that can easily be updated and becomes, in my mind, a bit of a living document for participants to use. If we can just jump to the next slide, please. So hopefully we've done just that. As Michelle mentioned, we have developed what we're referring to as a participant impact assessment tool or dashboard that can essentially sit on our website that we would look to update either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. We're yet to work that out. Now, the tool itself provides for an understanding of the congestion or impacts across time. So currently it's set to 3 years, and across those key delivery areas that we would typically report both in the roadmap or in our plans on a page for individual initiatives that we speak through at the PCF, for example. So there's 4 key steps that we normally cover off: procedure and guideline consultation, the actual implementation or delivery of IT changes, industry testing and readiness, and then eventually go live. And so based on any activity across those steps and across the initiatives that an industry segment or participant is involved in, we'd be able to provide essentially a traffic light assessment or a heat map assessment of the overall impacts at any one point in time. Importantly, the tool, I think, importantly from my perspective at least, the tool provides for a breakdown at both an industry-wide level and an industry segment resolution, as well as at an individual participant level. So at the moment, when I speak, when I mention the industry segments, we're covering wholesale, network, and retail and metering as combined, while at the participant level, we cover off the likes of generators, retailers, market customers, embedded network managers, things of that nature. Now, a couple of caveats that I always like to say when it comes to this tool. We know it won't capture everything that an industry segment or participant may have on the go at any one point in time. It's simply impossible for us to do that. What it will capture at least is an understanding of those impacts that are coming out of the reform program. And hopefully that information will support stakeholders with their own planning activities, accounting for those additional factors that I mentioned that we obviously can't capture. So we very much see it as being potentially an input into your stakeholder processes when it comes to your own decision-making activities more broadly. If we just jump to the next slide, please. So we see that there's quite a few benefits to this, some of which are listed on the slide, including AEMO's own ability to test our planning assumptions when we're first pulling together or beginning to develop our HLIAs. As it's a critical element, particularly as we consider our go live dates and those bundling and sequencing opportunities moving forward. The benefits can extend in a similar way to stakeholders or participants more broadly, but it can also extend to the AMC in some regard as well, who might want to think about the timing of their own rules consultation processes and the potential impacts on the overall workload for industry moving forward. As I mentioned before, we would likely see this sit on our roadmap, on our website, but alongside the roadmap. And so we've got a bit of a snapshot of our current website and where we propose that it would sit. Now, it's still very early days. We've flagged the development of this dashboard at the most recent PCF earlier this month, as well as taken the reform the RDC through a prototype of it in more detail just a week ago. We obviously need feedback and input from stakeholders for it to be of any value moving forward. That includes on its scope, its function, how we think about the impact ratings, and importantly, how we think about calibration of the tool. So what are the trigger points or thresholds that would move a rating, for example, from say green to amber or amber to red or back again, and so forth. So our current plan, if we just jump to the next slide, I'll just cover off. We've built essentially a working prototype of this model at this point in time. We're refining it based on some of the early feedback that we've heard to date. We'll continue to work with members of the RDC and PCF on the development of the tool, but we are certainly mindful that that's only a section of the industry at large, and so we're hoping to get further feedback on the tool from stakeholders and welcome any suggestions or any comments that you may have on how it may be of use. And most importantly, the biggest question that we had prior to the last week or so is this likely to be of value to stakeholders moving forward? Is this worth us kind of pursuing? I guess the good news there is we heard some positive feedback from PCF members and from RDC members that they can definitely see some value in this tool. Obviously, the devil's in the detail, and any model or dashboard of this nature is only as good as the inputs that go into it. So there is a little bit of work that we need to do to refine that moving forward. That being said, we will hopefully have this published on our website come early 2025, noting that we've already got a bit of a prototype that's in development already. So watch this space. We'll keep people updated, and we'll certainly include it in our newsletter and in our meeting packs once the tool is finalized, and certainly welcome any feedback in the meantime on it as we move forward. That's all I wanted to cover off on the tool today, Greg. So happy to hand it back to yourself.
Thanks, Lance. That's great. And as we say, there's a lot of work to go to incorporating this. So we hope that market participants, bodies find that useful in trying to understand or looking to refine our understanding of, for each of these initiatives, who's impacted, where, how, and when. Leonard, if we could move on, I think, to the next slide, which is our Q&A section. So I guess there has been a number of questions raised in the Q&A function. We will continue to answer in there, but just while your people are thinking through if there's any other general questions and themes, we did explore a number of questions and comments ahead of today's scenes. So here's a summary of some of the themes, the questions, and a response. So in terms of the NEM reform implementation roadmap, how does the program tie back to the Energy and Climate Ministerial Council's National CER roadmap? And I think that's what Michelle walked us through. So at the moment, there's basically a cross-referencing of those initiatives so we understand jointly where they are in the program, in the overall program, and how they're reflecting in our implementation roadmap. Another theme in terms of project planning delivery, how is that planning sequencing managed across the program? You can read there the response, but in general at two levels. So at the determination stage, in conjunction with the RDC and the AMC, they're setting those over, looking at that overall program. And then as we move down into implementation, you've seen the work that goes on in producing implementation assessments and detailed project schedules that fall out for that, with the intent of identifying market participant impacts for you to consider as part of your programs, how, when, whether to be involved. Program timelines, understanding what the next 12 to 18 months looks like, and I think that's at two levels. You'll see there from the implementation roadmap provide you with a holistic view across those reforms. Both those that are committed, those still going through the policy development with indicative go-lives. So you can see the overall scope, and that covers the East Coast electricity and gas markets. Regular forums, the NEM reform web pages provide overview of the detail implementation steps and for each of those in-flight and anticipated initiatives, very much a level of detail. And from a participant impact, we'd like to understand the impacts to participants and their interdependencies. And there's several ways. With each of these initiatives, we attempt to identify market participant impact. That said, there's some due diligence required on all of our behalves to understand the intent of those reforms. That's also included in initiative briefs. We do run regular forums, and we'll discuss those in a little more detail in a moment. And as Lance has just presented, we're working on providing an overall impact assessment tool. There's some general themes that we picked up. If we just go on to the next slide, we have a little time now. If you have a specific question, if you'd raise your hand, we'll endeavour to get someone on the call to answer it. If we can't answer it directly, we'll take it on notice and make sure you are responded to. I would ask you to bear in mind the scope of this. This is a general briefing looking to provide oversight or overview information. So at that, I see Cambers, you have a question.
Yes. I'm not sure whether I actually heard that one correctly or I took it correctly. I've actually also put it as a Q&A question. There was a discussion in relation to opportunity between the MSR and the IDX. And I just wanted to know if you can elaborate on that one, considering the timeline for the MSR within the 5 years. I'm not really sure what the IDX comes into it and how you reach the decision or the conclusion about there is an alignment between the development of IDX and the timeline for the MSR.
Dom, do you want to
Sure thing, Greg.
take that one at a level?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Campus, for your question. Look, the potential interrelationship between MSR and IDEX really relates to power quality data. So, with power quality data, we're talking about the exchange of data between participants. And so there's an opportunity to say, well, could we leverage the underlying foundational capability provided by IDEX to support that new business service? As I think I mentioned earlier, or maybe Justin mentioned it, there's a series of workshops, technical workshops that are planned to pre-consultation workshops that are planned to sort of flush that out and work through that with industry. But it was a potential bundling or leveraging opportunity that we've identified.
Thanks, Dom. Tim, you have a question or comment? Sorry, Tim, I think you are still on mute.
No, I thought I pressed the space bar would work, but it didn't. Look, I've asked various questions in the Q&A. I couldn't begin to ask all of them now, but I'd like to dip just particularly into the role of consumers and whether AEMO is really coming to grasp with the fact that consumers directly, not necessarily through a retailer or otherwise, are becoming participants in the market, particularly with regard to demand side flexibility. Now, for example, what Dom just talked on there about getting access to voltage data, the real-time data access rule change that AEMC is doing now should make all real-time voltage data available to all consumers who then can be providing it to their retailers and removing the current barriers we've got that exist by the behaviour of retailers and MCs in trying to restrict and monetize that data. Consumers just want to see value and not necessarily someone trying to make money out of their data. So how does AEMO look at how we're going to develop necessary market changes or tools that facilitate time shifting of loads to use forecastable renewable energy? And because it's not variable, it's very forecastable within a window out to 72 hours. So we should be using things to, manage where energy is stored in buffers, that'll be batteries, or to when we're going to run pool pumps or air conditionings, whether we might pre-cool or preheat our homes during the year. Dom did attempt to answer part of my questions there, but I've brought that out to others. But, it really covers across the sort of the metering requirements, the changes to the mass, the incorporation of that SCADA light, etc. Where do we enable consumers, and will AEMO really look as consumers as participants, not having assets that AEMO or someone else can control?
I guess, Tim, I'll ask perhaps Lance and perhaps Dom to come back, but just in general, when we're talking about things like the access to real-time data, that's still very much at the policy level, and once policy determined, if AEMO has a role in implementation, then absolutely that becomes part of the NEM reform program. But in regard to your specifics about time shifting, Lance or Dom, is there really much more that we can add at the moment to the responses there that we gave in the Q&A?
Dom, did you want to go first, or? No, you go first. I've already done a lot of talking already.
No worries. Thanks so much for the question, Tim. I guess the challenge that we always have with the program is it's very much centered on that implementation aspects of it. So what you're talking about is through the more policy discussion and decisions that need to be made. And so we obviously we being AEMO engage through the AMC's rule change process as you've called out, and then also through obviously all of the work that the CR working group and task force are doing at the moment as well. So I think a lot of those questions are up for design and for question through those mechanisms, and not so much through what is essentially the focus of the program in terms of the implementation of those initiatives that have reached that stage. That being said, when it always comes to the implementation, obviously what we're impacting what we're implementing will impact on decisions being made in the future. So AEMO are very conscious of that linkage between kind of what's being delivered today and how that plays out for future reform initiatives. Dom, did you want to add anything to that as well?
No, I think that's right, Lance. I mean, ultimately, Tim, as you're aware, we respond to rule changes that are put forward, and we will help implement them and facilitate industry in implementing them. We don't have a policy role in terms of making the decision. The AMC is the decision maker. I would, however, point out that we do have, as I put in my response to your question, there are at least 3 that I can think of off the top of my head, initiatives that directly go to what you're referring to, time shifting. So MSR, the rollout of smart meters should facilitate more, I don't want to say the word complicated, but more, less traditional, I suppose, tariff structures, which may facilitate time shifting or behavioural change and time shifting, but behaviours by customers. FTA and IPRR should also facilitate the deployment of flexible DRs that can then be utilised through our processes. And I noted your comment about sort of controllable versus sort of non-controllable resources. I suppose these 2 initiatives. Our role is to facilitate the introduction of the market mechanisms. So we're working with market participants to support the introduction of those market mechanisms. You would imagine that SGAs and retailers and the like would then engage with consumers directly to define new products and services that might utilize those market mechanisms. So whilst AEMO is not sort of directly involved in with consumers in trying to work out what those products and services might be, by sort of developing the market that could then be used by those products and services, we're sort of indirectly supporting the uptake of such time shifting capabilities or load shifting capabilities.
Could I just call you out a little bit on? Could I just call you out a little bit on that? In that, I was on the Consumer Insights Collaboration Stakeholder Steering Group with the ESB for 3 years. I was part of that stakeholder steering group. Was effectively the pressure test for all the rule changes that were appropriate. That included IPRR, is now what was called Scheduled Light, the flexible trading arrangements, which had well, actually it's called something else now, but that's unlocking CER benefits, but you're still calling it FTA. All those rule changes were sponsored by AEMO and were pressure tested by the ESB. So I'd correct you to say that you're not involved in policy or the approach you take at it. And the last part of your answer, that you're dealing with the business part of it. My position is now with flexible resources and services, there is consumers are in competition as a participant with the retailer. So we have a problem that the retailer, particularly gentailers, are a market participant to which are shareholders in AEMO and stakeholders you referred to. And AEMO is not taking the bigger picture that is important for consumers. So it's been put to me that AEMO doesn't have a responsibility under the NEO to deliver the lowest community cost of energy. I believe it does. And I'd like to be seeing that AEMO had within these work streams that you're doing here in these processes that say, what does this mean for consumers and where are we going about, decreasing volatility to deliver lower cost energy systems? And I do think it's AEMO's responsibility. And if you're abrogating it, then I look forward to seeing the AER regulate you.
Tim, I think we take on note your comment. I guess as we were looking to point out at the outset of this briefing was really about the implementation. We take your point about some of the policy implementation. and we'll take that on board, but really from the point of view of progressing those reforms that have been mandated by the AMC and foundational, that to an extent, purpose of this briefing. But as you say, there is a role in the policy development. We take a notice and encourage you to keep pushing that view to make sure that those aspects of direct consumer aspects are recognised by all.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, with that, I don't see any further questions there. So perhaps if we could roll on, Lynette, to the next slide, which I think is our wrap up. Okay, how to get involved. As we said, purpose of this briefing to provide people with an overview of the reforms being implemented, the high-level impacts. So please consider those impacts for the roles in your organisation. We understand there's a number of initiatives in flight and upcoming. So from that point of view, please perform your detailed assessment of the impacts if you need and how you need to be involved from an implementation point of view, considering the timing, the status of all of these initiatives. Hopefully we provided you an overview of that program, or our program, jointly in progressing the energy transition. In terms of next steps and further engagement, Leonard, if we just go on to the next slide, the NEM reform program run a number of standing forums which facilitate involvement across on a monthly basis across the implementation of these reforms. I'd probably point out that if you look at the forum list there, from the Program Consultative Forum down, these are very much focused on the implementation of all of those in-flight initiatives at various levels. The PCF providing an overview, Implementation Forum focusing on the detailed implementation steps for each of those reforms, the EWCF, the ERCF on the procedural development and the implementation of that regulatory change across the wholesale and retail sectors of the market. The ITWG very much comes together for specific industry testing of each initiative, and we do have a number of working groups that have been set up on a specific initiative basis to consider detail aspects of the implementation or the design of an initiative as they go through. So should you wish for any direction about how to be involved, where to be involved, we have listed on the right there the forums. We have an industry calendar, or if you wish to have a discussion with the team about the appropriateness and timing, please contact us at the NEM Reform mailbox. We'll arrange to have a conversation with your organisation about where, how, and when to be involved. Okay, and we've now reached the end of our briefing session. We've asked if you would spend some, if you look in the Q&A section, we have a briefing survey there, and we'd ask you just spend a couple of minutes providing us some feedback so we can consider going forward, how useful and the type of information that you find out of these sessions. So at that, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and your input, and I hope we've been able to provide you some information that helps you consider the implementation of a number of these reforms as we continue our journey through the energy transition. So at that, thank you all. And we'll close the session. Thank you very much.